Aristotle described metaphysics as the study of being as being. What he meant was that metaphysics is the study of the underlying nature or principles of reality, not just what things are, but what it means for anything to exist at all. Metaphysics asks the most fundamental questions. What kinds of things can be properly said to exist? What makes something the kind of thing it is, as opposed to something else? And why does change happen the way it does? Statements such as everything that happens has a cause, or there is only one basic substance, are metaphysical because they deal with the underlying structure of reality. When metaphysics focuses specifically on the nature of existence or being, it is called ontology. At the centre of Aristotle's metaphysics is the idea of substance, what something really is. He divided things in the world according to how they can be described. The most important category is substance itself, because everything else, ontologically, depends on it. Take the example of Socrates. We can say Socrates is a man. Here, Socrates is a unique individual thing, what Aristotle calls a primary substance. We can also speak of man or animal more generally. These are secondary substances, kinds or classes that apply to many individuals. Other features like colour, size or place, being tall, white or in Athens, are not substances at all. They exist in something else. Thus, for Aristotle, substances are the foundation on which all other properties depend. Without them, there would be no colour, size or shape to describe. Aristotle went further and identified 10 basic ways in which something can be said to exist. These are known as his categories. Substance has existence in its only right. The other 9 categories depend on it. They are quantity, for example, 6 feet tall. Quality, white, rough or hard. Relation, double, larger than, shorter than. Place, in Athens. Time, yesterday afternoon or last year. Position, standing, seated, crouched. Possession, wearing shoes. Activity, cutting or throwing. And passivity, being cut or being struck. Each of these only exists in relation to a substance. For Aristotle, then, substance is special because it has primary being, while everything else possesses being derivatively. To explain what substances are made of, Aristotle introduced 2 key ideas, matter and form. Every physical thing has both. Matter is what something is made of, form is what gives it its structure and identity. A piano, for example, is made of wood and metal. That's its matter. But it's the form that makes it a piano rather than a heap of parts. Similarly, a bronze statue is made of bronze, but its form, the shape of a human or a horse, makes it a statue. These 2 aspects always go together. Matter provides the potential, and form provides the actual identity. To describe how things change and grow, Aristotle added another pair of ideas, potentiality and actuality. A seed is potentially a plant. When an acorn grows into an oak tree, it becomes actually what it was capable of being all along. Potentiality is what something could become. Actuality is what it really is once that potential is fulfilled. Aristotle believed that to understand anything fully, we must know 4 different kinds of causes, or 4 ways of explaining why a thing exists as it does. Using an oak tree as an example, the first cause is the material cause, what it's made of, the acorn. Then we have the formal cause, the pattern or structure that makes it an oak tree rather than something else, its genetic plan in this case. Then we have the efficient cause, what produced it, the parent tree. And finally, we have the final cause, its purpose or end, and that's the fully grown tree. These four causes together explain what something is, how it came to be, and why it has the form it does. Importantly, Aristotle used them for the term cause. He used the term cause in a broader sense than we do these days, and he means that which is responsible for. So these causes are not just mechanical pushes and pulls, they are the fundamental reasons for a thing's existence. Aristotle was a student of Plato, but he disagreed with him on one crucial point, the nature of reality. Plato believed that truth and knowledge belong to a separate, perfect world of forms, timeless in a way such as beauty and justice and triangle. The things we see around us are, in his view, imperfect copies of those perfect ideas. Aristotle rejected this. He argued that the essence of a thing, what makes it what it is, does not exist in some distant, invisible realm. It exists within the thing itself. The form of horse, for example, is not floating in another world. It's found in every individual horse. By observing many horses, our minds recognise what they share and then form a general idea, what Aristotle calls a universal. So whereas Plato's philosophy points away from the physical world towards perfect abstract forms, Aristotle's brings knowledge back down to earth through experience and observation. For Aristotle, knowledge begins with the senses. By observing things repeatedly, we recognise patterns and develop universal ideas. This process, called induction, moves from individual experiences to general truths. Aristotle believed that repeated observation allows us to identify the essential characteristics or forms that define things. Our intellect then recognises these universals as such, turning sensory experience into understanding. So Aristotle's philosophy relies on empirical means. Our understanding of reality grows out of what we can see, hear and examine, a position that was to be reinvigorated, with some modification, by David Hume in the 18th century. Plato, by contrast, believed that understanding comes from pure reasoning about perfect, unchanging forms. So if we summarise Aristotle's view of reality, we have substance, which is the foundation of everything. Each substance combines matter and form. Change happens through potentiality becoming actuality. Everything can be explained by the four causes. Knowledge begins with experience and observation. So Aristotle's metaphysics gives us a picture of a world that is orderly, purposeful and knowable, one in which every change and every being has an explanation. Thought has developed some way from the seemingly haphazard approach of the pre-Socratics. In the end, Aristotle and Plato represent two great starting points in philosophy. Plato argues that reality and knowledge belong to a timeless, rational world of perfect forms. Aristotle argues that reality and knowledge are found here in the changing world we can observe. This contrast is also one knowledge gained through logical reasoning and knowledge gained through empirical observation. That same tension reappears many centuries later in the early modern period. Descartes, Leibniz and Spinoza argue that true knowledge comes from the mind and the application of reason alone, and that's known as the rationalist tradition. John Locke, Berkeley and David Hume argue that knowledge begins with observation and the senses, and that's the empiricist tradition. In this way, the Greeks set the agenda for all later Western philosophy. Their debate about how we come to know reality, through the intellect or through experience, still shapes how we think about science, knowledge, and truth today. All of that said, one might argue that Aristotle's system does not really address the most fundamental questions of existence, such as why there is anything at all, or why reality takes the particular forms that it does. Why are the laws of nature as they are rather than otherwise? Gravity, for example, depends on the mass and density of objects, but there is no reason it has to work that way. It simply does. That is how the universe happens to be. Aristotle's framework explains how things exist and change within the world, but it does not reach the deeper question of why there is a universe with these specific principles in the first place. In doing philosophy, it is often easy to forget the mystery of existence itself, the astonishment that first moves us to ask philosophical questions at all. It is also interesting to note that Aristotle's ideas about form, about the defining structures that make things what they are, may reflect more about how human beings conceptualize the world than about the world itself. His system assumes that the categories and forms through which we understand reality correspond to reality as it truly is. Yet it might be that these are simply the ways we, as a species, find it useful to organise our experience, a framework shaped by our particular interests, limitations and perspective, rather than by the intrinsic structure of the universe itself. In this way, one might claim that, although Plato's theory of forms might be flawed, it contains a degree of imagination that Aristotle's philosophy has lost.